Hello, dementia caregivers. This is Riza Carlton, dementia coach, consultant, certified dementia practitioner, and physical therapist. Better understand the behavioral changes with your loved one with Alzheimer's and dementia is to understand what is actually happening in the brain and the changes in the brain with Alzheimer's and dementia. I prepared a presentation that I will be sharing here. Dementia. So the brain with dementia actually decrease in size because with the Alzheimer's disease progressing, the brain cells are deteriorating. Deteriorating means the actual brain cells are shrinking. So therefore, it decreases the size of the whole brain. I learned the brain in physical therapy school. It's too complex. It can be overwhelming. But I came up with the simplest possible way to learn the parts of the brain that is related to Alzheimer's and dementia. As you can see with the medical terms, don't pay attention to the medical words. I'm not big on highfalutin words as well. We'll make it simple. What I want you to focus on is this is the brain. What is its function? What does it do? And what happens with this part of the brain with dementia? So we'll start with the cortex. The cortex is the executive of the brain. They call it executive because it is responsible for higher thinking skills, decision making, reasoning, and safe judgment. So there are four parts of the cortex that we will learn, and you will see that the changes in your loved one's behavior is actually happening in the brain. And understanding it will give you more compassion about your loved one not having any control over these behavioral changes. Let's start with frontal lobe. Frontal lobe is responsible for higher thinking skills, problem solving, memory, safe judgment, controlling impulse, emotional and verbal expressions, initiating an activity, and sense of smell. So, what happens in the frontal lobe with dementia or Alzheimer's disease? There is changes in personality that you will notice with your loved one. They become impulsive, which affects their safe judgment. Problem solving is a challenge. They have poor safety judgment, hard time concentrating, planning, and starting an activity, and loss of smell, which affect the appetite. Now, for the frontal lobe being impaired, you will notice with your loved one with change in temperament, they become more argumentative, they easily get angry where they're not used to be that way. And they have trouble concentrating and doing things and starting an activity. An example will be putting on clothes, which it was an easier task before. Now they struggle. They don't know how to start and where to begin. So that is an impairment in the frontal lobe. Next is parietal lobe. It is the sensory center of the brain. It translates touch, pain, taste, and temperature. It also judges the size and shape of an object, judging the distance, and interpreting spoken and written words as well as symbols. So, in this part of the brain with dementia, what happens? They will start having struggle in balancing checkbooks as they have difficulty in interpreting numbers. adding, subtracting, and all that with the balancing checkbooks. Problem identifying objects. This is where you notice that your loved one is using or mistakenly using an object because the parietal lobe is translating, for example, the toothbrush looks like a hairbrush for them. The remote control is a cell phone, and prescription medications look like candies. So that's impairment in the parietal lobe. Also, their body thermostat is off. This is the reason where you come to your loved one's home or in your home, they set the heater in the summertime, or they are wearing 2 layers of sweaters in the summertime because their thermostat is not working as it should. Temporal lobe is the hearing center of the brain. So it translates what the person hear into meaningful words. Now with dementia, they lose the hearing and the ability to understand sounds and spoken words. So this is what happens. Usually the ear and the hearing are spared in Alzheimer's disease and dementia. The problem is the temporal lobe, which when you talk to your loved one, they can hear you. They can hear the words, but the temporal lobe is unable to translate those spoken words for your loved one to understand and to reply to you. So don't feel bad when you try to talk to them and they are not responding. They are not ignoring you. It's just the impairment in the temporal lobe. They are unable to understand what you are saying. They hear it, but they cannot understand and they cannot reply to it. And that's when, they're not talking back to you and you feel like they are ignoring you. It is the temporal lobe that's not working. Occipital lobe is the vision center of the brain. It interprets everything we see, analyzes colors, shapes, depth perception, movement, object, and face recognition. So what happens with your loved one with dementia in this part of the brain? They are unable to recognize familiar faces and objects. So this explains that they get to a point where they cannot recognize you as their loved one, their spouse, their family, their daughter, is because of the occipital lobe not working properly anymore. Limbic system is called the primitive brain. They call it primitive brain because it is the first brain to develop, the developmental stage of the brain, and it is the first brain that loses its ability and fades away with your loved one with Alzheimer's and dementia. So limbic system is spared and preserved until the later stage of dementia. So this is very important for you as caregivers to understand how the limbic system works and what happens with the brain with dementia. So limbic system has 3 brain parts that we will learn and make it easier for you to understand what they do and what happens when they are not functioning anymore. So hippocampus is responsible for storing long-term memories, emotional memories, and movement memories. Now, take note of this. This is the key brain for learning new things. So when people say that, oh, they have dementia, they have Alzheimer's disease, they will not get better, they will not learn. And this, you can tell this with the hippocampus, this part of the brain is trainable. And as long as you do the activity with your loved one in a consistent manner, then they will adapt to that new activity. Because what happens, the short term memory is turned into a long term memory. Now, the limbic system is more focused on emotions. And with your loved ones with Alzheimer's and dementia, that's where they rely on as the dementia symptoms progress. So, as caregivers, we have to pay attention to, to those emotions because that's what they will be using to relay their message and what they want to express, especially when they become nonverbal. Emotions become very important communication between you as a caregiver and your loved one with dementia. Now, amygdala is an important part of the brain that is responsible in emotional responses. The feelings of hunger, thirst, pleasure, fear, anger, and anxiety. So this brain is the one that responds to the fright, fight, and flight situation. So in a situation where there's a fire, so your amygdala will tell you there's a fire, you hear the fire alarm, and what you do is you get frightened and then you react to it by finding a safer place away from the fire, right? So with that's what happens with the normal brain. We hear the fire alarm, amygdala kicks in and say, go to a safer place because there is fire here. Now, with the brain with dementia, their response to the fright, fight, and flight situation changes. And they will consider the triggering factors like hunger, thirst, being tired, feeling anxious, more into emotions and negative behaviors like acting angry, argumentative. They get frustrated or agitated as a response to those triggering factors like feeling hungry, tired, sleepy, or fearful. So your loved one loses the ability to express and communicate to you and say, I am tired, I am hungry, right? And they will look for food. They don't have that mental ability anymore. So it comes out as being anxious, agitated, and as a caregiver, it's good to have this skills and paying attention on those emotional responses of your loved one so you can identify, are they tired, are they sleepy, or just hungry. Now, the hypothalamus is the regulator for emotional responses. It controls the appetite and it regulates the body temperature. So mostly this part of the brain is a as well as the body temperature. Now, what is the takeaway from this course? So from what we learned, and the limbic system as the brain that responds to emotions, we have to focus on the parts of the brain that are spared and still working in your caregiving approach. So again, I will say it. Focus on the parts of the brain that are spared and still working in your caregiving approach. So learning the cortex is involved with the higher thinking, decision making, personality, and behavioral changes, as well as the limbic system is more responsible for emotional responses. With the Alzheimer's disease and dementia progressing, your loved one is leaning more toward the limbic system because It is spared, the cortex, they lose that mental ability early on. And it's the limbic system that gets spared in the late stages of dementia. So it's very important to um, learn and understand your loved one. What are the triggering factors? What triggers them to be upset, to get anxious, to be fearful? It could be feeling pain, but they are unable to communicate that. They can be hungry, they are sleepy, or thirsty. So I hope this is beneficial to you as caregivers, learning that the actual changes happens in the brain itself, and your loved one doesn't have any control over these changes, and and they need you for you to be there to providing them snack if they're hungry, if they're having pain and unable to communicate it. You can have them in an over the counter medication or any home remedies that can alleviate the pain. So, this is very important and a good take home to learn and apply to your loved one. Thank you so much. Till next time.